Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And here's a big one. We're going to be talking about the newest album, the sophomore album from Chris Stapleton, called From a Room, Volume 1. I remember reviewing Chris Stapleton before he got famous. And yeah, I know that sounds like such a music critic hipster thing to say, but there is some validity to at least acknowledging it, because his rise over the past few years has been nothing short of meteoric, and to some extent unprecedented in modern country. Here's a guy who, thanks to a performance with Justin Timberlake of all people, got the sort of commercial boom that led to his debut record Traveler selling millions of copies, spawning commercial copycats on reality TV shows, and helped galvanize an entire indie boom in country music, and he did it without country radio. And sure, this happens in other genres all the time, but country's been tethered to the radio for years, hell, probably decades. The fact that Stapleton got as big as quickly as he did is nothing short of miraculous. It has been heralded by so many critics as a tremendous achievement. And yeah, the majority of that is fantastic news, great for country as the genre. But I can't be the only one who's a little bit amused that the whole question of Traveler's overall quality kind of got lost in the shuffle. Because again, I reviewed that album months before the star-making performance, and while it is a very good album, to me, not really a great one. Sure, there were some great songs on it, but it also felt kind of uneven, a little overlong, and showing some of the hesitant steps that characterize a lot of major label debuts. Certainly was not the best country album that came out in 2015. In retrospect, a lot of critics probably would not have put together my review if they had heard the album in the headlong rush of Stapleton's popularity, especially nowadays in clickbait review culture. But you know what? I stand by that review. And it led to some interesting questions going into his follow-up, From a Room, Volume 1, with the second part reportedly coming out later this year. Now, I was excited for this. It was reportedly leaner. I like the song Broken Halos a lot, released before the album, although it's not the single for some reason. But I also had the feeling this album is going to face a very different response from the audience than Traveler got. For one, Mercury Nashville has had no idea how to properly handle Chris Stapleton's insurgent popularity, so the commercial rollout of this record has been embarrassing and terrible. But for another, now that Chris Stapleton is big, I'm curious how many of the indie country or the hipster fans, hell, even the mainstream fans, will start to push Chris Stapleton back towards some of the backlash zone, even if he is working with Dave Cobb again. But then again, Dave Cobb is starting to fall towards the backlash zone among some indie critics. So where does all this take Chris Stapleton? Well, honestly, this was a perplexing listen. Not a bad one by any stretch. Chris Stapleton is too solid of an artist right now to release an outright dud, but there is a part of me that does feel like From a Room Volume 1 is a little bit compromise. And well, you could argue that was kind of obvious going in. The fact that instead of getting a full single album release from Chris Stapleton, we're getting two that'll probably both run short as Mercury Nashville continues to mishandle the promotion and the marketing, and why can't they get this right for once? And this is not Chris Stapleton's fault, but at the end of the day, they're also only working with the songs that he's giving him. And it's also less than we would otherwise expect. Of the 9 songs that we get here, stretching barely over a half hour, one's a Willie Nelson cover, and the other is a song that he co-wrote for Lee Ann Rimes nearly 10 years ago. No matter how you cut it, even if the promotion has been utterly wrong in getting him out there, that's still slicing it really thin. Well, granted, thin would be another way I would describe a lot of the production and instrumentation on this album. And in a way, I kind of get it, as Dave Cobb is clearing things out of the way to make room for Chris Stapleton's huge, expressive vocals, let him really take center stage on the live recordings here, some of which are the most bare bones and sparse that Chris Stapleton has ever used. From the bare bones strums on the lead-off single Either Way, to the slow bass groove and circular guitar line lurking through the album closer Death Row. There's a few nifty tricks with the creaking atmosphere I really quite liked, even if I do feel that it could have ended a little bit more strongly. Kind of trails off and it didn't need to. Hell, that's probably the exact same issue I have with the otherwise likable, choppy guitar melody on I Was Wrong. It could have used a strong concluding note to drive the track home, and it just didn't have it. Hell, the more I think about some of these compositions, even on songs I otherwise really love, like Broken Halos or the Southern Rock muscle of Second One to Know, they can feel a little abortive, or in the latter case, end on a fade out that could have been expanded out a little bit further. But the real frustration is that, just like on Traveler, Chris Stapleton's production is at its best when it picks up a little bit of smolder and intensity and match the singer. And yet, more often than not, he's playing to a lot of these softer, mid-tempo country vibes that may pick up some solid organic tone against the sparse tap of the drums, maybe with a little bit of pedal steel and harmonica, but nothing that can really match the intensity as effectively in those melody lines. The only song song here with any real southern rock swagger is second one to no. I mean, yes, the melody on Without Your Love gets kind of close, I like that song, but the pickup in the guitar just doesn't have the bite that it really could, and I have no idea why. Now granted, I'll admit this is not the Steel Drivers. I'm not expecting Chris Stapleton to play southern rock on this album, and even if his voice might make him a more natural fit for blues or soul, especially on songs like I Was Wrong, I've got no issue with him in country. And you know what? To his credit, he's picking up more subtlety as a performer. Broken Halo's perfect example of this, and the weary, burned out vibe of Either Way and the heartbreak that opens up Without Your Love, they're damn near perfect in the way he sounds great on these songs. But where things get a little distracting for me is, like with Traveler, the placement of the backing vocals from his wife, Morgane Stapleton. Oh, they've got chemistry, their voices blend really well, but when you consider the songs being sung, well, at least the other main couple in country music, Jason Eady and Courtney Patton, they know where their vocal interjections fit in the content of the song. Whereas with Morgane and Chris Stapleton, I don't know if it's an issue of production direction or they're just not thinking about the context, but she should not be singing backup on the Willie Nelson cover, Last Thing I Needed, First Thing This Morning. It's a breakup song. And unless we're looking to draw the dramatic parallel that she's going through the same issues he is, it doesn't really seem to fit all that well with very different perspectives. It works even less so in Up to No Good Livin', where Chris Stapleton, he's complaining about how he's moved on from his rough life in the past, he supposedly earned her trust, and thus he shouldn't be judged for that past now. Unless the subtext is intended to call her out as a hypocrite for doing a lot of the same things, it doesn't make a lot of sense that she's singing opposite him on this song. And yet bizarrely, on a track like Either Way, a track where the relationship is utterly spent and Chris Stapleton doesn't care if she leaves or goes, that love is not coming back, the song's intensity might have actually been improved by seeing both people's perspective, and yet Morgane Stapleton's not on the song, it's just Chris here. It's playing in the same territory as Jason Eady's stunning song Where I've Been, and yet it doesn't pick up the same lonely exhaustion by going alone that song had. Now, of course, that's asking him to compare Jason Eady's writing to Chris Stapleton's, which might not be entirely fair, especially as Chris Stapleton compensates for being a much more powerful singer. But if we're gonna talk about lyrics and content, we kind of have to, it's a little bit dispiriting that the bare bones approach taken to the production can kind of carry over to the lyrics, because just like Traveler, there just isn't that much detail to elevate or add a lot of color to these songs. Death Row is the example that springs most to mind. If you've heard any blues song about death row, you will have heard this song's arc and detail already. It doesn't really reinvent the wheel, but it also comes into them stems as well. A throwaway song about running out of weed that is not only a pale facsimile of Might As Well Get Stoned, but on a record that's already starved out for original material, you don't have space for throwaways and filler. That said, there are little bits of cleverness that sneak through in some of the writing. Even if Chris Stapleton's gruff intensity can render some songs a little bit more sour than they otherwise should be, like some of the petulance that slid up between the lines and Up to No Good Livin'. Yes, I get that Chris Stapleton isn't exactly supposed to be framed sympathetically on that song, or maybe even I Was Wrong, but if you think you're gonna get out of saying you don't love your significant other by then emphasizing how much you now want to hook up with them, well, okay, good luck with that apology. Let's see how well that works. Frankly, I'd prefer to see songs that have a little bit more nuance in the writing, like Broken Halos and those that try to do good for people and then fail, or the lingering pain and loneliness of Either Way or Without Your Love. But sadly, there aren't that many songs that fit into that lane. But in the end, look, there's a part of me that feels for Chris Stapleton here. He's got a huge voice and one of the best producers working in modern indie country, and yet he's hamstrung from releasing a great single project because his label wants to drip feed his music in 2 parts and does jack shit in proper promotion. But at the same time, you have to make the most of what you have. And while I like this album, just like Traveler, I don't really love it. Where that album had bloated moments, From a Room Volume 1 feels stripped down to the bone. And while Dave Cobb is a great producer that I've praised so many times in the show, he can only do so much with what he's got here. And when you add up to a few artistic missteps and writing that doesn't always have the weight that it could, what could have been a great listen for me becomes a merely pretty good one, but still worth checking out. For me, it's a light 7 out of 10 and a recommendation. And while I can see a lot of country fans, both indie and mainstream, supporting this, and I argue that they should if we want to keep up the indie country trend and keep it relevant, honestly, if I'm going to go to indie country, I'm going to listen and put more money on Jamie Wyatt, Natalie Hemby, Courtney Patton, and especially Jason Eady before this album. It's good, and I'm happy that Chris Stapleton broke through, and you know what, while he's not quite there yet, I want to see him land on his feet and actually deliver some quality. So yeah, definitely make sure to just buy and support this. It's worth it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. This review is going to be a little later than I expected. I had to re-record just crazy reasons you don't want to know. But beyond that, since the last time I covered Chris Stapleton, I pissed a bunch of you off. The poll's up there for you all. Tell me how wrong I am. If you want to still support him, the link to buy the album is in the description below. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get more involved in my scheduling process, the link to my Patreon is right there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on records, even possibly more, and once per week you guys get to add records to my schedule if you're in the higher Patreon tier. It's pretty busy right now. I'm really happy with all the engagement that's going on there, but there's the options. You want more details? Links right there, but until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.